BattleRealm presents World War Zero, the Russo-Japanese War, 1904 to 1905. Before the trenches of Europe, before the world burned in 1914, there was another war, a war that introduced the world to machine guns, barbed wire, and the horror of industrial killing, a war that would foreshadow everything that followed. This is the story of the Russo-Japanese War, the first modern great power conflict, a war that the world has nearly forgotten, but should never have. Welcome to World War Zero. At the dawn of the 20th century, two empires watched each other across the waters of the Pacific. The Russian Empire, sprawling and ancient, with dreams of expansion into Asia, and the Empire of Japan, small but hungry, determined to prove it was no longer a sleeping island, but a rising power. For Russia, Manchuria, and Korea were keys to influence and prestige. For Japan, they were a lifeline. Diplomacy failed. Pride took over. By February 1904, war was inevitable. On the cold night of February 8, 1904, Japan struck first. Without a declaration of war, torpedoes raced through the darkness toward the Russian fleet anchored at Port Arthur. Explosions shattered the calm sea. Flames rose from the decks. The age of the samurai was gone. The age of modern war had begun. The Russians, caught off guard, scrambled to respond. Their pride and their Pacific fleet were bleeding before the war had truly started. In Korea and Manchuria, Japanese troops landed with precision. They marched swiftly northward, disciplined, well-trained, and fearless. Facing them were the Russians, vast in number, but plagued by poor leadership, outdated tactics, and broken communication. At Nanshan Hill, the Japanese fought uphill through minefields and barbed wire. Machine guns tore through ranks of men, but wave after wave, they came on. When the hill was taken, the Japanese buried 4,000 of their own and 7,000 Russians. It was a victory, but it showed the world how modern war would look. Massive losses, mechanical destruction, human endurance pushed to the edge. By summer, Japan had surrounded Port Arthur. The siege would last 5 long months. From the hills above, Japanese artillery rained shells onto the harbor below. Russian sailors lived in terror, trapped, bombarded, starving. The Japanese dug trenches, tunneled under the forts, and detonated massive mines. Each blast shattered the night sky and the soldiers' sanity. When the Japanese finally stormed the defenses in January 1905, Port Arthur was a graveyard. Both sides had fought with courage, but the Japanese had prevailed. If Port Arthur was a siege, Mukden was an apocalypse. In February 1905, more than 600,000 men met on the frozen plains of Manchuria. For 17 days, the world's largest battle to date unfolded. Rifles cracked, cannons roared, and entire divisions disappeared into smoke and chaos. The fighting raged across miles of trenches and open ground. Commanders lost control. Soldiers froze, bled, and vanished in the white void of war. When the guns finally fell silent, Russia's army was shattered. 90,000 dead, wounded, or captured. Mukden was a disaster that Europe should have learned from, but didn't. Desperate for revenge, Tsar Nicholas II sent his Baltic fleet on an impossible journey. 18,000 miles from the Baltic to the Pacific. For 8 months, they sailed around the world, plagued by disease, storms, and despair. And waiting for them, off the coast of Korea, was Japan's Admiral Togo Heihachiro, a master tactician. On May 27, 1905, The two fleets met in the Tsushima Strait. The battle lasted barely 2 days. Japan's gunners were faster, their ships more agile, their crews sharper. Togo executed the deadly crossing the T maneuver, trapping the Russian line under relentless fire. When it was over, 38 Russian ships were gone. The sea was littered with wreckage, fire, and the ghosts of an empire. The Russian navy had ceased to exist. The defeat was total. At home, the Russian people revolted. Riots spread, workers struck, and the Tsar's rule wavered. It was the prelude to revolution. Meanwhile, Japan emerged as the first Asian power to defeat a European empire. The balance of the world had shifted. At the Treaty of Portsmouth, brokered by U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt, Japan gained control of Korea and parts of Manchuria. Roosevelt earned a Nobel Peace Prize, but neither empire would ever be the same. The Russo-Japanese War introduced the horrors that would soon define the 20th century. Trench warfare, machine guns, barbed wire, heavy artillery, propaganda, mass death. Every lesson learned in Manchuria would be repeated on a far greater scale. In the fields of France, Belgium, and Poland just 10 years later. From the ruins of Port Arthur and Mukden rose the tactics that would consume millions in the First World War. This war was not just about land or power, it was about the end of one world and the birth of another. It was the war that ended empires, inspired revolutions, and gave rise to the century of conflict. The soldiers who fought in 1904 could not have known it. But they were already standing at the edge of the modern age, where steel, fire, and blood would rule the earth. This was World War Zero. If history teaches us anything, it's that the past never truly ends. Every battle echoes forward, shaping the wars, the nations, and the world we live in today. You've been watching BattleRealm, where we bring the forgotten wars of history back to life. If you want to see more stories like this, subscribe, turn on notifications, and join us as we uncover the wars that changed the world, one battlefield at a time. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and remember, the first shots of the modern age were fired long before 1914. This is BattleRealm.